afternoon, everyone, and welcome to episode 13 of Wowhead Weekly. This time, for the first time, the show is actually live streamed on Twitch, on twitch.tv/wowhead. So if you want to come and join in the fun on future weeks and future shows, you can join us on twitch.tv/wowhead. Make sure to follow at Wowhead on Twitter to get announcements of when the show is going to go live, because we're going to be doing it through there. And hopefully, it's all going to go according to plan, but do bear with us, do give us a little bit of patience, and be kind to us, as this is our very, very first time live streaming. So this week's episode, we have had a ridiculous number of builds, and we've got a few other bits and bobs of news here. But first, as always, to introduce my co-host and Wowhead site manager, Perculia. How are you doing this week, Perk?
This is really scary. I haven't ever streamed before, but yay, first time for everything. And I'm also really tired with all the beta builds.
Oh my goodness, yeah. It's been crazy. Like, if people probably don't know what the other stuff I do for ZAM apart from working on Wowhead, but I've been crazy busy with all of that other stuff that I do for ZAM this week. So poor old Perk's been kind of left on her own. How many builds? We're waiting on one right now.
This is build number 4, and we had one guy is on vacation, so we've sort of had a small staff. And there was one really early Tuesday, like 3 a.m. Then there was one Wednesday, Thursday, and we're waiting on another one right now. So lots of builds.
It's been kind of a crazy amount of builds this week. I kind of feel like, and I don't know whether you agree with this, Perk, I kind of feel like they're getting smaller. Like, I was around for one, was it last night? I can't even keep track of this anymore, or the night before.
Yeah, there was one that was definitely, they're definitely a lot smaller.
Yeah.
The first one this week had a lot of tuning changes, and the one yesterday only had 2 things, I think. Maybe.
Yeah. It was the warrior, the buff to blade storm.
Yeah, the blade flurry, and warrior change, which was a bug. That's
right. Yeah. So it's all kinds of weird stuff going on with builds, but we've got a bunch of them to talk about. We'll cover those later on in the show. But first up, we wanted to hit some interesting news, which merits a little bit of explanation. So PvP season 15 had its end announcement post up this week. So, okay, I am aware that not everyone here PvP, so you may not all be that super excited about the PvP season ending, but the reason why we talk about this is because the end of the PvP season also often signifies a 2-week warning for a patch coming out. Now, this isn't guaranteed. It's not 100% of the time. It's not sort of, absolutely categorically, this means that without any sort of shadow of a doubt, the build is going to be coming out on the 14th of October. But it's likely based on past experiences. So all of the Mists of Pandaria builds work this way, and it seems reasonable to expect it. However, it's always the case that Blizzard can delay these things, can slow it down, can decide that actually, no, you know what, we ended the PvP season, but we're still going to have another week in between, so it doesn't matter. But it's definitely exciting. I don't know how confident we really are about the 14th at this stage, because I know...
Yeah, I've sort of been losing confidence.
Yeah, you've been saying that there's a lot more that still needs to get sorted out in the department of bugs and that sort of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I just comparing how things were with Mist of Pandaria, we had a big push with data about 2 to 3 months before the expansion hit, and then they started to taper off, like a month or 2 before. I mean, we're not getting, the frequency of builds was not increasing, 2 weeks before you would think the free patch was coming. So I'm sort of, I still think the 14th could make sense, but they just keep pushing all of these codes and changes, and I'm not sure. But since there's nothing to do on live, we're going to talk about what's coming in the pre-patch anyway.
Exactly that, yeah. So one of the interesting things that we saw this week was actually a post from lead game designer Ian Hazzikostas talking about some changes to a tanking mechanic called Resolve. Now, if you haven't been keeping up with all of the news, and honestly, the last time we talked about this on Wowhead was, I think, when I interviewed Celestalon. Like, I think it was that long ago that we actually talked about this on Wowhead, because he was talking about Resolve then. But it's a mechanic that's been around for a while within the beta and within Warlords of Draenor development. It's a thing that basically, it replaced the tanking mechanic Vengeance, which was a thing that increased your damage done as a tank based on your damage taken. So if you, it caused people to do all kinds of crazy things, like, for example, Trekkie from Method told me on a couple of occasions how he'd do things like sit down when he knew he was about to get a hit that wouldn't kill him, so that he would then... Yeah, exactly. It was crazy. It built up a ton of vengeance, and that would allow him to do more damage and be a stronger, more powerful DPSing tank as a result. So in Warlords of Draenor, they decided to get rid of that mechanic and turn it into this thing called Resolve, which increases your healing and absorption based on the damage taken, and also your stamina has a factor there as well. So They've basically altered the formula on that because of how they changed Vengeance to basically some legacy code from Vengeance where you got less Vengeance from being hit by several mobs because of the way that damage was spiky in Mists of Pandaria. They've now altered it so that you're getting the same amount of Vengeance when you're being hit by several mobs.
Right, and that makes sense because tanks are dying to sustain damage in Warlords with their new model as opposed to spikes in Mist of Pandaria. So that legacy code didn't really make sense in the context of how they wanted to change tanking in general.
Exactly.
So beta testing dungeons should feel a bit smoother after this hotfix, which I believe has been applied.
Yeah, exactly. So it's basically what this means for tanks is that actually you just got a little bit stronger. So if you're tanking, don't freak out about this. It's a really good change. And I think that the reason the old code was sticking around is because they were worried that people would build up and pull more and more and more and more to build up their vengeance and to get huge damage numbers going out. And this isn't a problem anymore with Resolve. It's actually a nice change. And the spike damage thing, which Perk was talking about, is really important to remember. There's not going to be the case in Warlords of Draenor, like we've had it in Mists of Pandaria, where your tank is just going to get punched in the face and straight up die. This goes in along with a lot of the healing changes which have been talked about as well. So the things like triage healing becoming more important. People are going to be sitting at low health for longer. So not everyone's going to be sitting at 100% health 100% of the time, feeling all happy and joyful. And it's also not going to be so much of a whack-a-mole thing going on with healers where you're trying to just maximize everyone's health all of the time. So I think honestly,
we've been getting a lot of awesome guides in from our class guide writers, and all of the healing ones are already done. So we're going to be early next week putting together a preview of all of the healing guides, so you know exactly what to expect for all of your classes in 6.0 and then moving forward into Warlords. Yeah. So healing compared to I think some other roles got a lot of changes, so we want you guys to be aware of all those changes and not feel scared by everything and read our really awesome user-friendly guides.
Absolutely, and they're done by all sorts of people. They're done by experts who we're getting in from outside. They're really, really fantastic. Perk and I have been working on them just today actually, and so we're really excited to get those out there, and we're going to be releasing them around the launch of patch 6.0.2, so do keep an eye out for those. They are awesome, hopefully. And Laura's just clarified in chat that actually base stamina affects Resolve, but your stamina on gear doesn't. So if you just thought, oh, I can build up my Resolve to be ridiculous and crazy and top healing meters by maxing out my stamina on gear, oh well, spoilers, it's not going to work. And so the next thing we wanted to talk about is something that we found out a little bit more about from Blizzard this week, which is Brawlers Guild Season 2. So, Perk, I know that you've been putting a guide together on this. As ever, you can find all of this information, but once this goes live on Wowhead, it'll be down there. I'm pointing at nothing right now for those of you watching on Twitch, but for Wowhead viewers, it is right down there in the post on Wowhead. All of these guides are going to be linked. So, Perk, fill me in on this. There's a follower as a reward for this?
Yeah, there is a gnoll that looks like Hogger, who is a boss that you can fight, and after you defeat him at rank 5, you will get the scroll that teaches you this follower permanently, and then he can be your Garrison, and he looks really cool. And so Brawlers Guild Season 2, there's no new bosses, but the follower is a very cool new reward, and there's also a ring that teleports you to your Brawlers Guild, and it's better than the previous ring because the stats change based on your spec. So it's not just a strength ring. You can have this, awesome agility ring, or, it switches to intellect if you are healing. So it's pretty good. It's probably, worth spending the gold more than it was in Mist of Pandaria. So those are two really cool rewards. Another thing that's really interesting is that there's 8 ranks down from 10. And that means that some bosses are just optional bosses that you don't need to do along the way. And Hexos is one of those optional bosses now. So he's not blocking anyone, but they're switching around all the ranks. So some other tricky bosses are now at lower levels. Like Nibley, I think, is rank 4, perhaps. So, you win some, you lose some, but I think people will be happy that Hexos is not blocking you.
Oh my goodness. I know a lot of people were very happy to hear about that, but it's really interesting. Like another example is that I believe Bruce is now going to become a level 5 boss.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of curious, like, is Bruce, I'm assuming that Bruce is not actually getting a rework to go with that. So he's still going to be good old Bruce. He's still going to do his chomp, chomp, chomp. And he's still inevitably going to chomp people the first time they try to kill him. But like, it's kind of weird to me. Like the boss progression, with a few exceptions, obviously dependent on class and spec. Some classes have an easier time with certain fights than others. others. But there were a few bosses that felt kind of like big difficulty jumps, but with the exception of that, it was a relatively smooth increasing curve. So I'm curious to see whether there have been any changes made to things like the tuning to make these bosses a little bit stronger, higher up.
Are they meant to sort of surprise you now? I don't. I mean, yeah, Nibley was pretty bad with the taunting that could happen and just sort of the buggy paths, and you could walk and get stuck on a wall.
That's true.
So I don't know. I don't know how you can really scale that down to an easier rank, but I guess we will see.
Absolutely.
Also, you can't do Brawler's Guild between the pre-patch, whenever that goes live, and Warlords of Draenor, so you can't, try to run in and be like, oh my god, let me look at my awesome gear and see if I can beat this without Hexos now. You have to go in there. It's scaled for level 100, so you can access that when Warlords of Draenor hits and have a month or so off now.
Yeah, and in all honesty, given that it's being scaled for level 100, you wouldn't be able to do much in it at level 90. That would be kind of a no. So bunch of interesting stuff going on with Brawler's Guild, but another thing that we've heard a little bit about in the past couple of days is the removal of follow on Ashran. Now, if you don't know what I'm talking about here, you've probably heard of Ashran if you've been keeping up with any of the news on Wowhead and around the net for Warlords of Draenor. But what am I talking about with follow? I'm talking about the follow command where, if you're nearby another player, like if I'm nearby Perk in a dungeon and I'm going to go get a cup of tea and she's going to carry on running towards the boss because, she's great, I'm going to click onto Perk and I'm going to follow her. So you can also do this with a /follow command, and it was being used in Ashran and obviously causing quite some problems with multi-boxers and other sort of things to that effect. Oh my gosh, yeah, it was kind of crazy. Like you would see big groups of obviously just people working together because only so many people are getting accounts into the beta. So, if you're 40 boxing on the beta, something weird's going on with your account access. But nonetheless, it's obviously a problem. And I think that it's a similar discussion to how it worked around Battlegrounds, where I don't know if you guys remember, but a while back, Blizzard also took the step of removing /follow from Battlegrounds in an attempt to deal more with botters than multi-boxers. So it was due to exploiting, because bots will often use /follow in order to, get into the action and make sure that they don't get kicked for AFK. Not such an issue in Ashran, but nonetheless, you don't want people botting that content. And also multi-boxing in Ashran is kind of a problem. So it seems like the developers have taken this step for exactly the same reason as they did in Battlegrounds. I guess the question for me is it really necessary in Ashran? Is it really a huge problem? And the answer is definitely yes for bots. They're never going to stop bots altogether, but removing follow in Ashran just gets another way that they can make their lives harder.
Right. Just can you clarify? I mean, you can't report people for AFK in Ashran, can you? Because
no, you can't.
It's just like a zone. So
yeah, exactly.
On a battleground, you can at least get rid of some of the people that are just being, dead weight.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It's kind of hard to do that in Ashran because, you're allowed to AFK in Ashran, it's fine. I AFK in Ashran all the time when I'm working on stuff for Wowhead and immediately get killed inevitably because I'm AFK, and that's kind of stupid. That's the mechanic for dealing with it in Ashran, I guess. But I do think that it's reasonable to remove this. I completely understand the people who are upset by this though, because certainly for people who enjoy multi-boxing in smaller numbers or obviously have any kind of differently abled in any way so that prevents them from easily moving in game, follow can be a really useful tool. I remember ages ago there was talk about this guy who managed to raid Firelands despite being almost completely blind by using follow with a guildmate to go through
they named items after him.
Exactly, Davidian and it was Davidian and
Hexu.
That's right, Hexu. My brain was going Hexos. No, that's a Brawler's Guild boss. Hexu, yeah. So people like that, obviously this is going to hurt them in Ashran as well. But I guess Blizzard have made a least worst answer here and taking follow away. It's consistent with Battlegrounds, so that is something in their favor at least. But there you go. So we've also had a ton of stuff going on Wowhead this week. One of the things we try to do on this podcast is give you guys an idea of what we've actually been up to on Wowhead, and it's particularly a great chance for Perk to talk about all the cool stuff that she does, which nobody can really see, the stuff that's in the background that just makes Wowhead work perfectly. So we've had a ton of stuff, but the first thing I wanted to touch on was a really, really cool guide that Perk put out earlier this week, which is all about what is coming up in 6.0.2. Now, if you've been watching the show, you'll know we've been pushing the guide for what's going away in 6.0.2. Obviously, all of the stuff that we've spoken about before, and it's right there. Again, I'm going to link it under the show. But we've now got a more positive one of what's being added in 6.0.2 because a ton of people have been asking.
To, not to be sad about.
Exactly. So, Perk, we've got a ton of stuff coming in. Do you want to just run people through really quickly?
Yeah, definitely. So, like I said, it's all in the guide. It's at the, top of Wowhead, but what you are getting in this patch are new character models. This is for every single race except for Worgen, Goblin, Pandaren, and Blood Elves. And Blood Elves are a schedule, just not in the pre-patch. You're getting the toy box, which it's really cool. It's basically an account-wide vanity item collection, and it frees up all the space in your bags, and it's just really nice. I love all this bag space. There are even more bag space improvements. There is a bag specifically for reagents, and there's a button that lets you put all your crafting materials in at once. That button is amazing. You have a whole nother tab of void storage, and you have new raid sizes, which I'm sure will confuse everyone. Where basically Flex is normal, normal is heroic, heroic is mythic. They have new raid sizes. Everything is on separate lockouts, which means that you can do Mythic and do Heroic in the same week, as opposed to previously Normal and Heroic shared difficulties. And there is also the Blasted Lands event, which sort of sets the stage for Warlords of Draenor. And you can do some quests to get this really cute Iron Star pet and a title. And you can also run a level 90 version of UBRS, which has loot which pays tribute to the old loot in UBRS. And it's eye level 550, so that's really good. If you have alts, you can get them some, flex quality gear pretty quickly.
Yeah, that's
and
really
there's
awesome
tons of other stuff, but those are sort of the highlights. Like there's tons of UI improvements, like, map tweaks, quest tweaks. The mount journal lets you favorite mounts and summon them at random. Tons of cool things, but those are the big things. So pretty much you can't level to 100. Yeah. You can't get your Draenor perks. You can't get your level 100 talents. You can't build your Garrison. But you can start seeing what the spell changes are. Your class is getting its buffs and nerfs. Hi, Celestalon in the chat.
Yeah, thanks for that, Celestalon.
And your characters look really pretty, which I think a lot of people are, pleasantly surprised about. So you can preview everything. And as a side note, you can change your character's face now in the barbershop. So you don't, if you're like, oh, well, the old version of this face was really ugly, but this new version is awesome, you don't have to shell out money. You can just change that at the barbershop.
All of a sudden, the barbershop's actually going to have people in it again. Like, they've been completely bereft of population for a while, and now everyone's just going to be running to the barbershop to get their face sorted out. And it's worth mentioning also, obviously, with things like the Garrosh heirlooms being a guaranteed drop for your main spec, we've actually, within the class guides that we mentioned earlier in the show, we are actually going to be putting in a special surviving with your new spec at level 90 section. So if your spec has suffered some changes or undergone some reworking, and you've logged into the game on the day of patch 6.0 and just gone, oh my god, how do I even my spec anymore? Then you should go over to Wowhead, and we'll have all of those guys there with little sections just how to deal with it. It's going to be okay, everyone, and this is kind of how to deal with it at level 90.
I mean, also do keep in mind that even if you think you know your class pretty well, they're not going to be awesomely balanced at level 90 because they're balanced around having, Draenor perks or things that are, your abilities are going to be stronger, your talents, different synergies. So, just have fun. Apparently, Siege of Orgrimmar is easier in the pre-patch than it is now. So, just have fun for a few weeks. Go collect some toys in the toy box.
Definitely.
Get your cute UBRS pet.
Yeah, exactly. And the Iron Starlet, which is adorable as well. And it's kind of worth remembering that this isn't meant to be, like, there's not going to be a world first mythic Siege of Orgrimmar or anything like that. This is just meant to be for Blizzard to have the ability to actually just test the new raid sizes, the flexible scaling, because all of the everything's flexible with the exception of mythic now. So you've got the flexible scaling where the normal and heroic, which are currently flex and normal, will go up to 30 and down as far as 8, I believe. The sort of advertised minimum is 10, but I believe that the scaling will allow you down to 8. So you've got all of this to test out. So go have some fun, get some heirlooms and enjoy it. And do look at the Wowhead guys if you're confused at level 90. It's definitely worth looking at it. So the other stuff that has been going on Wowhead this week, I know that we have a really exciting bit of news that we are welcoming another member onto the Wowhead content team, which is awesome. So Perk, Serene is coming on board. Did I say it right? Is that how you say it?
Serene, Sarah, she's awesome. She has written several guides for Wowhead before. She's written a guide to weapons that match your gold challenge mode gear, and she does our healing priest guides, and she's always finding cool stuff on the beta, like she's just sending me stuff, cool things I should cover. And we're really excited that she's now going to write weekly articles for us and also assist me with, some database things like cool screenshots of, mounts or pets or anything popular. She's going to help out, sort of do research and help me write stuff on. So her first article went live today. It is on wild battle pets, and it's a really cool topic because if you collect every wild battle pet in Draenor, you get this super cute peacock pet. And people love seeing that when I share that 3D model. So she just broke it down by zone, like where's the best place you can find these pets, what all the pets look like. And yeah, people really like it, and I'm really happy she's on board with us.
Yeah, she's awesome, and it's a really fantastic guide. So if you're it's just what I love about it is that she's been so specific in nailing down the region. So you're not just sort of gone into a zone and been like, right, guess I'll start looking for this then. She's been really specific, and it's an awesome guide. We're super excited to have her on board. But you've also been really busy with your all of the database work that you do in the background. So you've been working a lot on the item finder now, I understand?
Yeah, the item finder is basically, as the button says on /items, for people that feel overwhelmed by Wowhead filters.
Yeah.
So we want to get that working for 6.0 because everything is changing and we want everything to be very easy and friendly on Wowhead. So the item finder basically lets you search for important things without having to go through filters which might get overwhelming. So for example, if you go to the item finder, you can select little boxes like, I want to find gear, I want to see flasks, I want to see enchants, I want to see things for in the level 70 to 79 range, or max level. So you basically just click on a bunch of pictures and simple words and you get the stuff you need back. And what we've done on the Warlords version of the item finder, which will be the default version when 6.0 goes live, is that we've added a new level 100 section, and we've added the option for you to choose gear from different sources, normal dungeons, heroic dungeons, and all raid difficulties. And as we've said before, it's kind of confusing how all the raid names are changing in 6.0, so we thought it'd be really good if you could just be like, I want to see all my level 90 loot that is from a mythic raid. And it's like, oh, well, here's all the mythic, Siege of Orgrimmar loot. So we're really happy that we added that in. And if you're trying to plan, gear list or how you're going to gear up in the expansion, you can now do that if you, select the level 100 option, and you can, see the heroic dungeon loot, or, things only from LFR, or, trinkets from heroic. So that's all done. And it's a really sort of good way to get more familiar with Wowhead filters, get comfortable, and then you can start, mucking around in the really technical stuff.
Yeah, you can start doing the real extreme filters that are way more technical. There's so many of them that the item finder is such a good, that feeling overwhelmed page. I really highly recommend it because Wowhead filters are incredibly clever and you can do amazing things with them. And honestly, don't just ask Perk because she'll just get asked all of the time, but she is really smart with these Wowhead filters. But yeah, it's a really fantastic tool. So you've also been working a ton on improving the Garrison buildings, if I understand.
Yeah, we have another round of improvements for them. Every few weeks we try to sort of adapt to what Blizzard does because they keep pushing changes for Garrisons. But if you're familiar with how we handle things like holidays on Wowhead, if you visit the holiday page, they'll have, tabs underneath for like all the items tied to the holiday, like all the achievements. And if you visit a page for like a holiday battle pet, it will, say in the quick facts, it'll be like, oh, this is tied to this world event. Then you can click on it. So we've done the same thing for Garrison buildings, basically. So if you visit a particular level, you can see, all the recipes you can buy. If there's like a follower ability that makes the building do something cool, like herbalism, for example, making you pick the type of herb you want. If there's like, transmog gear from the armory building, will show like, hey, this is the level 1 stuff. This is the stuff that's only available at level 2. So we have all these tabs, all these items and quests and achievements and followers associated with all the building pages now. And, like I said before, if you visit a particular item page, you can see in quick facts that, something is available only at level 3, or, this is easier to get, it's at level 2 and 3. And we think that just sort of adds a lot of clarity to the Garrison system in general and like what things you get from which building and how you can plan stuff out.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm really excited about that.
It's a really useful change as well. It just makes it so much easier to, like, because there's a ton of stuff being added into the game in the expansion. It just makes it really easy to see in the quick facts on the right hand side exactly where all of the stuff is. And to access the Garrison calculator, you're going to want to go into, where are you going to access this Garrison calculator to see the list of buildings?
Okay, so you can, well, if you are on the Warlords version of the site, wad.wowhead.com, or by the search box, make sure that you click the Warlords box, have that checked. You will go to database, and then garrisons, and then buildings. And if you haven't visited that in a while, you'll notice that just sort of like our list of all the buildings, it has been super pretty in the past few weeks. There's like pictures of all the buildings now for Alliance and Horde. It's not just like a wall of text listing everything. Yeah. And that's also been a cool recent improvement.
Absolutely. It's really looking good right now. So if you're curious about anything at all about garrisons, do just go over there, check that out, have a look at it. I've just been poking around trying to figure out what I want to build in my first garrison, trying to work all that stuff out and planning ahead. So it's really fun to see that. We are also, I'm really happy about this because one of the things that I love doing in game as part of exploration is going around and opening up treasure chests. Now, if you may remember a while back on Wowhead, we had a tiny little post about some jumping puzzles, which were like, we haven't found many of them, but there were a few in there. And they are basically things where you jump up a little track in order to access, in some cases, a treasure chest, in some cases, a boss, in some cases, just a cool place to sit with an ice block. And so we've finally been able to get these onto maps, right? All of these treasure chests are now actually on maps on Wowhead.
Yeah, it was a bit tense because we weren't able to data mine objects for a while. So I was getting a bit anxious as the deadline was getting close. I'm like, please enable the thing that can let us get the data on the site. And it happened on Friday or Monday, I forget when. But basically, we have all the treasure chests on Wowhead. You can see the location, you can see the loot that's contained in them, and that's really useful. And even more stuff is coming. Like, we want you to be able to see all of them at once on a map on his own page and just, have it be, easier to track. Like, you can be like, I want to see all the rares and all the chests at once. So we know what we want to do with them. We're just sort of rushing to get that done now that we can finally do stuff with the data. But that's super cool, and there's tons of really cool things. Like, there's this fishing lure that's named after one of the fallen protectors in Siege of Orgrimmar. And this is his lucky fishing line, and it gives you +4 to fishing skill on your fishing pole. And I just thought that's sort of like a cool tribute. Like, he has it's Rook's unlucky talisman, I think, in Siege of Orgrimmar, right. And now this is his lucky fishing line.
Yeah, good old Rook. So, and there's some really cool stuff as well, that like there's something that allows you to hypnotize critters to follow you, and there's some really fun stuff in all of these little sort of like treasure places. So do definitely check that out. I know that honestly, like that's as soon as we get into the actual live game, that's going to be one of the first things I do, because it's a good way to supplement your toy box as well. So no, really, really excited to hear that. And there's a ton of really cool stuff that Perk and RU and Auroras, the devs, are working on. So you can really sort of see what Wowhead is doing. It's really exciting, and I can't wait for more and more of this to start coming out. So moving on, we have had a ton of beta builds this week, as we mentioned at the top of the show. There's been an absolute like ridiculous slew of beta builds coming out recently, and Perk's been dealing with them. So we're not getting a ton of changes. Again, as we mentioned at the top of the show, they're not like huge, massive builds. I would say that the most recent really big build was kind of the one where they added in all of the legendary cloak stuff, and we haven't seen a massive one since then almost.
Yeah, I would agree. They did some additions to work orders in the Garrison, maybe the build with the legendary quests or the build after, but they've done some much needed Garrison improvements in the past few weeks, but that's not really sort of any new data. Like, we haven't been getting tons of new items in, for example, or new spells. It's just like, or like new things in the toy box. They haven't been flagging more things as toys, or, drastically changing the models on things that have new cool models. It's just been a lot of, class buffs, class nerfs. Earlier this week, we had a lot of set bonuses that got changed. So, if you're into theory crafting, you've probably already seen the post. You don't need to have to recap all of that. But, sort of like the final round of class tuning seems to be going out. And I know there's also been some nasty bugs, something with the dungeon where it prevented people from testing them, it was tied to some movement issues.
Yeah.
So I can see where they're trying to fix that because they want testing on their dungeons.
Oh,
Obviously.
definitely. Yeah, it was a weird bug where any kind of encounter which forced you, which involuntarily moved you, so movement which wasn't player input, was causing people to just immediately DC and all sorts of terrible things going on. So good to hear that they're fixing that. But we do still have a few little cool tidbits from the beta build to talk to you about. We've been talking about the Garrison stuff, but we found out that the Salvage yard gives you the transmogs that you see on the character selection screen, right? So,
Yeah, that was a really cool Twitter discovery.
definitely.
When I've tested at the Salvage Yard a while before, and it was sort of buggy and wasn't really giving me anything. But people were talking to Blizzard devs on Twitter, asking like, "Hey, I got this really cool item. Is this intended?" And yes, you are meant to get if you complete a mission and you have the Salvage Yard, you have a chance to get a special box in addition to your usual reward. And you can take that box to the Salvage Yard and open it, and it can contain junk, it can contain herbs, but apparently it has the chance to contain class specific gear, which has the really cool character selection screen look. So for rogues, for example, if the screen gear sort of looks like tier 1, but it's more elaborate, like there's more detailing on it. Hunters sort of look like a dwarven rifleman. Priests look like heroic Ice Crown Citadel. Yeah. They're just sort of neat, subtle variations on sort of iconic sets for each class. Yeah. So that was pretty cool to discover because I'm making all my transmog sets for the database, and I'm like, do I put these items in? Like, do I just sort of hide them from search results? And I'm like, oh, that's so cool. They're all coming, and I logged on the beta and I queued up a bunch of missions before the servers went down, so I'll see if I can get some of this gear myself and test that out. So
fingers crossed. Cool. That's really awesome. But it sounds to me like, for what you've been saying, and obviously people who are familiar with this and really into their transmog will know that there are other ways that you can get gear that's at least similar to these looks. So if you want this specific transmog gear, like, there's variants that are similar. Is there any sort of straight replacement gear that is available for them?
I mean, like in the post I did today, I sort of talk about things that look very similar, but they're sort of like high definition versions, especially of like tier 0 and tier 1 gear that has gotten updates. They're just more pixels. I don't believe you can actually get the monk gear as transmog because it looks like the starter gear, like the straw hat.
Yeah, the very first stuff from the Wandering Isle.
Yeah, so that might be something pretty, that's sort of more irreplaceable than like the Rogan, where it's like, well, I can kind of.
You could build something similar, you could build something along those lines. But also it's worth remembering before you're sort of thinking, oh my god, now I have to put this building in my garrison. You can definitely have different garrisons for different characters. You can destroy buildings and build new ones. There's all sorts of functionality there to prevent you from feeling like you have to build it.
Yeah, exactly. So, and yeah, you can keep the gear, rip the building down and build something else. You can just get the gear and be like, okay, I don't care about the salvage.
Yeah, exactly. I'm knocking it down now. I'm over this. I'm so done with it. So there was also a little bit of news that made me sad. A little bit of news on the beta.
Yeah, I blamed you for the news because
it's probably my fault. Yeah, I tweeted about it because I was really excited. So if you follow me on Twitter, you'll have seen that I am kind of fed up with Tanaan. If you've watched me and Perk on this show before, you've probably noticed that the two of us are a little bit fed up with Tanaan. Tanaan isn't an inherently bad zone. There is nothing wrong with it. There are some frustrating bits which I'd love them to tweak, where you're having to do things like follow people who are slow to catch up with you, or wait for little short cutscenes which you can't skip. And I mean, yes, they're short, but if you've seen them once, you probably want to skip them. And there's some little tweaks in there which I'd love them to do. But the story is fun, the zone is fun, but Perk and I have probably done it for like 40 times between the two of us.
I'm so tired of the zone. We've done it back when it was really buggy, so we just I think that sort of scarred us.
Yeah, exactly.
Very buggy and very laggy.
Exactly. So I was really, really excited when I logged into the beta to realize, thanks to a lady on Twitter whose name unfortunately escapes me, that the mages were able to buy the portal to their faction hub on Asheran, so Storm Shield for Alliance, Warspear for the Horde, at level 90. And I made the mistake perhaps of atting this lady and like alerted a bunch of people on Twitter to it. So I don't doubt that Blizzard already knew about the issue beforehand. All of this sort of stuff of, oh, don't mention this, like Blizzard don't know about it. They might have just missed it and that would have been cool. But They've actually increased the required level for the Warspear and Stormshield portals for mages to level 92. So a single tier and the world's tiniest violin for me there. So obviously I'm just going to level my mage to 92 and then port all my characters over, or make friends with a warlock. Either way, I'm so done with Tanan. It's not bad. It's not a bad zone. It's just something that we've done a little bit too much of.
Yeah, I think it's like me in the Timeless Island 5.4. I had it all to myself. I'm like, oh, cool, I've got most of Bigger Pact. And it's like, oh my God, these people, I'm not redoing this ever again.
Exactly. It's kind of just like one of those things where there's only so much repeating of content that any one person can bear to do. And I feel like Perk and I reached our limit there with the old Tanan Jungle Zone. I'm sure that everyone will enjoy it on the first time you go through it. It's only like 20 to 30 minutes. And I mean, you can get around it if you really want to. And I don't doubt that people will. Rather like the quest to open up the Veil in Pandaria. So you don't like, I remember a bunch of people having trouble when they first opened up the Proving Grounds because they'd go in there and the White Tiger would still be there because they hadn't done that gate opening quest. And so people will go around it, particularly on later characters. But I'm hoping that they might make it optional later on because it seems kind of crazy to have to go through this to just open up the island, the whole continent. But maybe that's just me.
We'll see. I mean, I see how it's useful if you have a boosted character because it can like familiarize yourself, but it would be nice if you had like, I don't know, some sort of like raid or proving ground achievement if you could not like Mr. Pandora if you didn't have to go back and redo it.
That would be cool. Yeah, if you managed to get even a bronze proving ground achievement that you didn't have to do it again, that would be really cool. I'd like that idea a lot. And so last up in the little bits of beta build news this week that we've got, we had some updates on In the Hall of the Thunder King, which is an achievement. So basically what it is that the Troves of the Thunder King keys are going away, right? So Perk,
they won't be obtainable. If it's in your bag, it's not going to vanish, but you can't loot them anymore.
Yeah, so you're not going to be able to find them on rares anymore. And if you have a key, right, Perk, you can still get in.
Yeah, and you can also buy the special things that make the run easier, like all those little consumables. Those are still for sale. So if you want to do this in like a year, you can take your key, buy the things that help you jump or run or move faster, and you can go in and do your run and loot, I don't know, 500 gold.
Exactly. So between now and patch 6.0, if you want to keep doing the Trove of Thunder, you're going to want to farm yourself some rares on the Isle of Thunder to get those keys. Because they still, like, I think Russ Peterson, Night Moogle on Twitter, tweeted that you can still do it 6 months later. So I might just farm some up and sit on them as a gold stash.
Yeah, it's also good to point out that people were concerned how this would affect sort of a domino effect with other content. And apparently Elder Charms of Good Fortune were only available via this treasure run. So they've changed it so the mobs that formerly dropped keys will drop Elder Charms. So if you want to, this is useful because world bosses, you can bonus roll them. So if you want to do Galleon or the Shah in the hopes of getting the mount, the coins will help. So it's good they didn't forget about that. And this achievement used to be tied to a larger achievement that granted a title, and they've removed that from the criteria. So the Stormbreaker title, you can still get that. You can still get your meta achievement done. It's just the Hall of the Thunder King is going to become a legacy feat of strength.
Yeah, exactly. So no need to concern yourself unless you relied on it for gold. In which case, find something new to do to get your gold. Or farm keys right now. Quickly do it. And so one thing we do every week on this show is we answer your questions. Now, you can email them to me on Olivia, Olivia. It's under my screen right now. That's my name there. But it's only the Olivia bit, not the Grace bit, at ZAM for mother.com. And you can send me questions on email there, or you can tweet them to us. And this week we have got 2 Twitter questions. The first one we're going to hit is coming from Nick Robson, and he says, hi Nick, what do you think of Blizzard making old content and materials relevant again? Can it be done? For example, adding more new content to world events, needing materials from older expansions for current recipes, etc. Now, Perk, it seems to me that they're kind of going away from this with the recent changes. Like, they're actually they seem to be making changes, particularly, we saw them with mining and herbing in Mr. Pandaria, where they remove the necessity to do that thing where you go back to Elwyn Forest and you farm your Peace Bloom and you mine your copper ore, and then you go on to the next place and farm the next things. They've kind of taken a step away from that with the Warlords of Draenor changes. So I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I think that they want old content to be relevant, but I don't think they're going to have professions be the hook that draws you in. Like we're seeing them revise holidays, for example, and I think that's going to make people go back to, old cities in Azeroth and do stuff, like in Stormwind or, do dungeon runs because there'll be, new drops from the bosses. But I don't think, I think they're sort of moving away from having to do old world stuff for professions, especially sort of putting everything in your garrison and being able to level pretty much anything from level 1 in your garrison up to max level. So I think it's more like, if you want to be like a real recipe collector, then you can, go nuts. Who knows? Like maybe if they like how the toy box goes, there'll be, achievements for collecting all these recipes, and then people will be inspired to go back and recipes that to like mithril ore, or, like
oh man, yeah, like all of the
drop rate in Angora, stuff like that. But yeah, it seems like they're moving away from that, and I sort of see where you're coming from because I have a lot of characters that I roll specifically to get professions, like a lot of cool recipes. I made a priest and a death knight right before Cataclysm so I could grab everything that was being taken away, so they have all these unobtainable things. So I do see the charm in that, and I think it's a lot of fun, but in general I think Blizzard is moving more towards this sort of garrison, sort of like very
centralized.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I think that like the idea of needing mats for older expansions from current recipes, I just don't think that there's the sort of balance in material gains and the amount of work that they'd have to put into that to make it viable for like every blacksmith to want a piece of ore that you can only get in the old world, for example, in the old like level 1 zone or something. That would just be
transmog
difficult.
if they decide to do something like a transmog collection, then having old world recipes might be useful because you can make distinctive stuff for people. But
definitely.
I don't think they'll be adding anything new. I think they'll just be they'll try to like emphasize transmog, or collecting cool models with previously existing recipe stuff they've done.
Absolutely, yeah. And I don't think they want like the brand new recipe for the brand new like top level hat is not going to have old stuff in it. And I don't think that many people, I wouldn't say anybody, but I don't think many people would like the idea of having to go back to the old world to farm materials for top level current gear. I think that would just be tiresome. So the next question this week we have from Dalton Imperial, who submitted several questions. So thank you very much for repeatedly submitting questions. We do appreciate it. And he's also got a profession question. And he is saying, how will skill points work for gathering professions in Warlords of Draenor, starting at both 1 skill point and 600 skill points? So
yeah, I've actually leveled herbalism from both, I think, from scratch and from 600 at different points on the beta. And basically you get skill points from, picking flowers. It just is that your yield varies in Draenor. So, for example, I might get a handful of petals at 1 skill level picking things in Draenor. But if I'm at the appropriate level, I will, get several full flowers. So the rate goes up. And so yeah, also they've been doing a lot of things where if your skill is higher, you get bigger yields on things besides gathering professions. Like if you are a chef and you're cooking a Draenor recipe, you create more servings as your skill level increases. If you're doing a special a daily cooldown for crafting materials, you can make more if your skill level is higher. And I believe you have like a super version of it when you hit 700. I need to check on that, but I believe that's the case in your garrison. So, pretty much you can definitely skill up with all professions, including gathering ones in Draenor. You'll just collect materials faster the higher your skill level is.
Yeah, so it's sort of similar to actually how they change them in midway through Mists of Pandaria, where you're able to gather locally and to sort of think of a word, green tea leaf, all of the time, but you're getting little bits of green tea leaf that you have to then magically stitch together in order to make 1 green tea leaf, which you can then use for your recipes. So it seems like it's similar for that. Have they done that for skinning yet?
Yeah, they've added the tech in for that. It was a little bit unknown, I think, in early alpha, but we've data mined the stuff. I believe there's a blue post saying that they added skinning in. I'll run that through and confirm. But yes, you can do that with skinning. And if you don't have skinning and you're like, oh my god, I want skins for leatherworking, you can use the barn building in your garrisons to trap mobs and then bring the traps back. And you can turn that in for work orders for your skinning materials.
Absolutely. So that's actually made it a ton easier in many ways to do professions in Warlords of Draenor. If you're interested in more profession information, by the way, I see a few questions in chat. We actually did a show on this a little while back, and I'm going to make a note to myself once I find a pen. I'll make a note to myself once I stop talking to relink the show and also the profession guide that Perk did, because it is a ton of information on all of the things that you can do, basically like restarting professions again from scratch way more easily, so it's easier to swap and re-roll different professions. There is a ton
You
of
can
changes.
even craft epic gear without the profession if you have the Garrison building. You can't
Exactly.
create everything, but you can create several useful things if you have the materials.
Yeah,
for
not the
making
best of the
scenes for
best,
Garrison.
not
Yeah.
the super, super top gear, but still good gear and gear that you're going to want initially on your main and latterly on alts. It's definitely worth looking at that guide. So I will remember to link it in the article which goes with this show on Wowhead. So that's it from us this week, guys. Thank you so much to the people who
Yay.
came by for the stream, for our very first ever live streamed Wowhead Weekly. Really, really appreciate you guys showing up and giving us some support.
Thanks for all the nice chat messages.
Yeah, exactly. And also for helping us with our volume levels, which are hopefully better this week, and finding the stupid noise gate in OBS. You can follow me on Twitter on Olivia D. Grace. Oh my God, I pointed at the right side. Someone call the Daily Mail. I need a lottery ticket or something. You can follow Perculia on Perculia, and they're going to point the wrong side for this. It's over there above her screen. You can follow Wowhead on Wowhead. Wowhead is spelled out beneath here. And you can find information about everything we've talked about in the show and just about everything related to the World of Warcraft in general over on wowhead.com. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you next time. Bye-bye.